You're woken up by fists hammering your door before the sun, before your thoughts even catch up. Your wife screams, your kid cries, but none of that matters to the men outside. They're yelling your name like it's a curse, like you don't belong. You open the door and 10 masked figures storm in like it's a cartel raid, black masks stretched tight across their faces, vests heavy with the weight of state-sanctioned violence. You're shoved to the floor. The zip ties dig into your wrists. You try to speak, to explain, to even ask why, but your mouth gets ignored like your rights. You're not read anything. No charges, no name of an arresting officer, no time for a lawyer. You're dragged out like a criminal. Your neighbors watching through curtains, wondering if you did something horrible. But you didn't. You pay taxes. You've been here for decades. Your kids go to school here. You coach Little League. You were born in this country, but in this version of America, that doesn't matter. In this twisted reversal, you are now the problem. The man who once wore a badge now wears shackles. You're thrown into a transport van with no windows, slammed shoulder to shoulder against others who look just as stunned. No one explains where you're going, only that you're no longer free. You arrive at a detention facility that looks more like a wartime prison than anything resembling justice. You're told you have no record in the system, even though you've paid into that system your entire life. Your phone is taken, your belt, your dignity, your process like meat photographed, fingerprinted, dehumanized. You ask for a lawyer, they laugh. You ask to call your wife, they ignore you. You ask if there's been a mistake. They say you people always say that. For the next 72 hours, you're trapped in a cold cell that feels like a fridge, the ice box, they call it. You're given a foil blanket, a sandwich, and the stench of a toilet you have to share with 6 strangers. Sleep comes in short, panic gasps. The lights never go off, the noise never stops. And that's when it hits you, the ICE agent, the enforcer, the patriot. You're now the detained, and no one, absolutely no one, is coming to help. And maybe now, for the first time in your life, you start to feel what millions have felt in silence, in shadows, and in chains. Maybe now, you understand what it means to be processed by a system that doesn't care who you are, only what you look like. Maybe now, the uniform doesn't fit so comfortably in your memory. And maybe now, you realize the badge didn't make you noble. It just gave you the power to be cruel without consequence. You think due process protects people, that it's a universal right, a shield against government abuse, but when ICE steps in, that idea collapses like a paper wall. Imagine being told you missed your court hearing, when no date was ever given. That's not hypothetical, it's how ICE operated for years, issuing defective notices to appear that left entire court dates blank, sending letters to wrong addresses, then turning around and deporting people in absentia for not showing up. It's a trapdoor dressed as a legal system, and thousands have fallen through it. The Supreme Court had to step in more than once, warning that a blank court summons is no summons at all. But ICE didn't stop. They flooded the courts with fake deadlines, backdated paperwork, and chaotic scheduling that made it nearly impossible for people to defend themselves. And when challenged, they just blamed the system they designed. Families have been torn apart over these technicalities. A father might be sent to Guatemala while his toddler waits at a U.S. preschool. A wife might lose her husband because his NTA was mailed to an address he hadn't lived at in 5 years. These aren't rare errors, they're a feature, not a bug. The result is a shadow deportation machine, one that doesn't need a trial, a judge, or even evidence to destroy a life. What makes it more sinister is how ICE pretends it's all legal, that every person they remove had their day in court. But the truth is, many never got that day. They were scheduled to appear in courts they were never told about, judged by silence they never meant to give, and punished with exile for failing to play a rigged game. There are people right now in detention centers, right now in fear, whose only crime was trusting a system that had already made up its mind. And if you, dear reader, ever wonder how a country that screams about freedom can deport someone without a fair hearing look no further than the bureaucratic smoke ICE uses to vanish the inconvenient. The law says innocent until proven guilty, but in ICE's world, it's invisible until removed. There are few things more unsettling than learning that even U.S. citizens born and raised right here have been mistakenly detained or removed by ICE. It sounds impossible, but it's happened, more than once. These are not undocumented individuals or people in the system with questionable status. These are full-fledged citizens who found themselves swept up in a machine that values speed over certainty. Mark Little, a man with mental disabilities born in New Jersey, was picked up in North Carolina and misidentified as a non-citizen. Despite giving his social security number and family contacts, he was sent across the border with no ID, no resources, and no ability to speak the language of the country he was deported to. It took months before someone finally realized the error and helped him return. Similarly, Pedro Guzman, a California-born man also living with cognitive challenges, was deported to Mexico after a minor legal misunderstanding. His family spent weeks searching for him, posting flyers, hoping to locate him in a place he had never lived. These cases aren't anomalies, they're signs of a deeper issue. ICE has acknowledged instances where U.S. citizens have been mistakenly processed through immigration channels. In one report, over 4,000 such cases were flagged for review. That's not a paperwork issue, that's a system issue. For those affected, the damage is personal and lasting. Reputations are impacted, jobs are lost, families suffer, and even once the truth comes out, there is rarely an apology or effort to make it right. The system simply moves on, leaving the individuals and their loved ones to piece together what remains. The real concern here is how easily someone can be placed in removal proceedings with minimal checks and safeguards. A wrong address, a misspelled name, or a clerical error can change someone's life in an instant. And while most ICE agents would never intentionally deport a U.S. citizen, intention doesn't erase impact. It's a reminder that in any process involving freedom, there must be room for verification, accountability, and above all human decency. Because if a nation can't protect its own citizens from being mistaken for outsiders, what chance do actual newcomers have at fair treatment? Step inside an ICE detention center, and you won't find law. You'll find the closest thing America has to a modern-day gulag, where the Constitution evaporates and cruelty becomes routine. These places aren't correctional facilities. They're holding pens for misery, overcrowded, unsanitary, abusive, and deliberately hidden from oversight. People sleep shoulder to shoulder under buzzing fluorescent lights that never shut off, wrapped in metallic blankets meant for disasters, not dignity. They call the cold rooms iceboxes, and they earn that name. The temperature is so low it feels like punishment, like the walls themselves are designed to remind you that your humanity doesn't matter here. Women are denied menstrual products. Diabetics are given the wrong insulin or none at all. People with broken bones are told to walk it off, and if you file a complaint, solitary confinement, retaliation, indifference. Look at the LaSalle Detention Center in Louisiana, where pregnant women have described being shackled during transport and denied prenatal care. Look at Stewart Detention Center, also in Georgia, where a double amputee, Carlos Gutierrez, was kept in solitary confinement because they didn't have the right wheelchair. He was literally punished for being disabled. Look at Irwin County Detention Center, where a whistleblower exposed forced hysterectomies, women having reproductive organs removed without informed consent. Think about that, forced sterilization, in America. In 2020, no charges filed, no names named, just silent suffering behind locked doors. Or take the story of Rumeses Turk, a Tufts doctoral student thrown into an ICE facility in Louisiana for a visa mix-up. She described being denied water, surrounded by guards who mocked and threatened detainees, and trapped in a cell where even sleep was a privilege. And then there's the mental torture, people locked up for months or years with no trial, no clarity, no end date. Imagine what that does to the mind. People forget what day it is. They stop eating. They self-harm. They scream into walls that never answer back. And while this is happening, ICE lies to the public. They call these centers humane, safe, well monitored, but there are no cameras in the abuse rooms, no accountability in the medical wings, no justice in a place designed to erase people, and worst of all, the public doesn't know, or worse doesn't care, because these detainees don't look like them, don't vote like them, or don't speak English. But suffering doesn't ask for citizenship, and in these black sites, behind concrete and wire, human beings' fathers, mothers, children are broken by design, not because of what they did, but because this country needed a place to put its cruelty, and ICE offered them a cage. They walk into homes like it's a war zone, black masks stretched across their faces, ice cold, chests puffed, as if they're kicking down doors in Fallujah instead of suburban New Jersey. And you've got to ask yourself, why the mask? Because this isn't COVID anymore, and it's sure as hell not for health. This is theater. This is intimidation. In the style of masks they wear, full face, tight-knit, slick, straight out of the drill rap scene in some random tactical gear. It's a street uniform. It's the exact same mask made famous by a notorious rapper whose name we won't say, but everyone from the trenches knows who he is. It came from a culture law enforcement claims to despise, a symbol they once used to profile, mock, and arrest. But now, they've adopted it like armor, not to protect themselves, but to weaponize fear. It's the twisted irony of authority. ICE agents wearing the very symbol of the men they target in raids, using the same aesthetic they once labeled gang-related to dehumanize neighborhoods, now using it to shield their own faces while traumatizing families. These masks don't just hide identities, they project a message. Don't fight back. Don't even think about it. They're designed to say, we're not here for questions, we're here for bodies. And deeper than that, they tell you these agents see themselves as soldiers, not public servants. They want to erase the line between war and enforcement, between suspect and citizen, between criminal and immigrant. But here's the thing: when you wear a mask made famous by the same kids you drag out of apartments at 5 a.m., you're not just appropriating their image, you're admitting they scared you. You're confessing their style, their rebellion, their chaos got into your bloodstream. And that's the part they don't talk about. The ICE agent who mimics the very aesthetic he once condemned is the ultimate contradiction, a badge-wearing cosplay of the streets, too ashamed to show his own face, but too drawn to the aura of fear to walk away. And so the ICE mask becomes a modern hood, not of the Klan, but of the state. It's there to erase accountability, erase emotion, erase the possibility that there's a human being underneath. You can't sue a mask, you can't reason with a mask, and that's the point, because when the knock comes and your name's on the list, they don't want you to see a man, they want you to see a monster, and in doing that, they become exactly what they claim to be fighting. Nobody wakes up dreaming of being an ICE agent. It's not a childhood goal. It's not on lunchboxes or Halloween costumes, because somewhere, even deep down, everybody knows what the job really is. You sign up thinking you're enforcing laws, protecting borders, stopping threats, but after the first few years of dragging barefoot kids out of homes and zip-tying grandmothers, something inside you either breaks or rots. And for the ones who stay, it's almost always the latter. ICE doesn't just turn people into enforcers, it mutates them into emotionally amputated operators. Every arrest they make, every door they kick in, every mother they separate from a crying child leaves a mark. But instead of confronting the trauma, they bury it under black gloves, government lingo, and the empty ritual of protocol. They say, I'm just doing my job. But that phrase is the final prayer of a conscience bleeding out. You see them in airports, standing proud in their uniforms, acting like they're soldiers, when all they're really doing is paperwork and pain. There's no honor in raiding a motel at dawn and dragging a father out while his kids scream into the mattress. There's no glory in deporting a bakery worker who's been here 20 years, just because his papers lapsed. But ICE agents are trained to disconnect. They're taught to see people as numbers, as liabilities, as threats anything but human. And eventually, the disconnection becomes real. You can watch it happen, the eyes go dull, the smiles fade, the language changes. They stop saying person and start saying subject. They stop seeing mothers and start seeing targets. Some numb themselves with alcohol, others with silence. Some quit, but the ones who stay often become shells, hard on the outside, hollow on the inside, clutching to a uniform that lets them feel power in a world where they otherwise have none. And that's the deepest irony. The ICE agent who tears families apart by day often returns home to his own family by night, pretending nothing happened. He watches his kids sleep while knowing he just made some other child an orphan in the eyes of a boarder. That contradiction eats away at the soul if there's any soul left to reach. And for those who still believe they're the good ones, ask yourself this: how good can you be when the entire system depends on people like you not asking questions? ICE doesn't just damage the people it arrests, it quietly poisons the people who carry out those arrests, until what's left is a badge, a mask, and a man who's learned to stop feeling. When ICE arrests you, they don't just remove you from your home, they erase you from the map. You vanish into a hidden network of detention centers, often remote, often private, often impossible for your family to even find. These aren't temporary holding tanks, they're for-profit prisons with all the cruelty and none of the accountability. Locked inside, you might wait months or even years with no charge, no trial, just endless limbo while lawyers and clerks shuffle papers like your life's a spreadsheet error. The conditions: rotting food, freezing cells, overcrowded barracks, and no access to regular medical care. There are people inside who died from treatable infections. There are women who bled for hours without help. There are children who've gone silent from trauma. One whistleblower described women being subjected to unwanted hysterectomies, forced sterilization in the 21st century. In the United States, guards ignore complaints, cameras catch nothing, and when someone dies, ICE issues a one-paragraph press release, if that. And let's be clear, this is not just how jails are. These are immigrant detention centers, not criminal lockups. Many inside have no criminal record whatsoever. Their only crime is overstaying a visa, fleeing violence, or being born in the wrong place. But they are caged like animals, punished for being poor and unpapered. The system is rigged to keep them there, too. ICE often sets bonds impossibly high, denies access to counsel, or moves people across state lines without notice, deliberately making it harder for families to fight for their release. Some centers are run by corporations like Geo Group and Core Civic, who profit more the longer people are held. It's not justice, it's a quota system. The more beds ICE fills, the more dollars flow into private pockets. Detainees clean the floors, prepare meals, and do laundry for $1 a day, modern-day forced labor wrapped in patriotic branding. You want to know what a 21st century concentration camp looks like? It's not in a history book, it's in Georgia, in Texas, in Arizona. It's right here, right now. And it's being funded by taxpayers who are told this is about security. But there is nothing secure about a government that jails people without trial, hides them from view, and calls that democracy. ICE doesn't just detain bodies, it buries stories, silences voices, and manufactures suffering for profit. That's not enforcement, that's state-sanctioned disappearance. Behind every ICE raid, every detention center, every torn-apart family, there's a cash register ringing. ICE doesn't operate in a vacuum. It operates in a multi-billion-dollar ecosystem of private contractors, surveillance giants, and prison corporations that need bodies in cages to keep their profits alive. Companies like Geo Group and Core Civic are the biggest players, running dozens of detention facilities across the country with contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, money paid by taxpayers to imprison men, women, and children in subhuman conditions. And they're not just waiting for business to come to them, they actively lobby Congress to expand ICE funding, to increase quotas, to criminalize more immigrants. In fact, Geo Group alone has donated millions to political candidates who promise to get tough on immigration. But they're not the only ones cashing in. Data mining giants like Palantir Power, ICE's surveillance dragnet scraping social media, license plate readers, and predictive algorithms to track immigrants before they even commit a crime. These aren't just tools, they're weapons aimed at families. Airlines profit by flying deportees across the globe. Telecom companies profit from gouging detainees on phone calls. Food vendors profit from serving expired meals. Even the ankle monitor companies, yep, they profit too, charging fees to track free immigrants like they're on parole. And the kicker, the U.S. government guarantees payment to these companies no matter what, so even if immigrant detention numbers drop, the checks still come. It's a rigged casino where pain is the jackpot. Meanwhile, communities lose their fathers, mothers, neighbors, and nobody talks about where that ICE money really goes. School budgets shrink while ICE grows. Public housing falls apart while detention centers expand. Politicians posture about illegal aliens while quietly taking checks from the companies that jail them. It's not about safety. It's not about the law. It's about building a system so profitable, so interlocked with corporate America, that mass detention becomes not just acceptable, but essential. In a country that outlawed slavery, we've created a loophole where immigrant suffering is currency. ICE is just the middleman. The real beast is the monster we keep feeding behind the curtain, an economy that only runs if enough human beings are shackled, silenced, and sold. You can't scream land of the free while caging people for daring to exist. That's the contradiction at the center of ICE, at the center of this country's entire immigration theater. The same nation that celebrates Ellis Island, a symbol of hope, now floods its borders with razor wire and tells asylum seekers to go die somewhere else. The same country that praises dissidents in Cuba, Iran, and China turns around and locks up whistleblowers, deports political refugees, and blacklists entire nationalities with travel bans. It's a nation that lectures the world on human rights, while ICE officers force miscarrying women to wait in cells soaked in blood. A nation that cries foul when other regimes separate families, but lets ICE rip children from mothers and scatter them like files in a broken cabinet. The U.S. condemns autocracies for surveillance, indefinite detention, and secret courts, but ICE uses every one of those tactics daily, wrapped in red tape and sealed with patriotic branding. The hypocrisy, in a glitch, it's the operating system. America says we welcome the tired, the poor, the huddled masses, then funds an agency whose job is to crush them underfoot the moment they arrive. It trains border agents to speak in code about threats and illegals, as if fear can justify cruelty. It spins data and rhetoric to make poverty look like danger, and hope look like invasion. And when the people caught in ICE's claws cry out when detainees hunger strike or protest abuse, the government gaslights them, silences them, buries their stories under jargon like expedited removal and deterrence policy. But what are we really deterring? Courage, aspiration, survival itself. You can't claim moral authority while profiting off trauma. You can't lead the world while dragging children into courtrooms without lawyers. You can't wave flags for liberty while letting ICE behave like a rogue army inside your own borders. The real threat in the people crossing the desert, it's the soul of the country watching them suffer and calling it justice. ICE isn't just a stain on our values, it's the revelation that those values were never real for everyone. It's the mask slipping dot, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Look in the mirror, ICE agent, truly look and ask yourself, what would you do if the tables were turned? If it were your mother dragged from her bed in the dark, your child ripped screaming from your arms, your name whispered in fear by neighbors who once smiled, would you still believe you're us doing your job? Could you still wear that mask, that uniform, and call yourself a protector when everything inside you knows you're a prisoner in a system built on fear and cruelty? Imagine shackles biting into your wrists, the cold cell that smells of despair, the endless silence except for cries that echo through concrete walls. Imagine begging for a lawyer who never comes, for mercy that never arrives, for a future stolen because a bureaucracy decided you were disposable, could you survive that? Would you keep your soul intact, or would it break, shatter under the weight of betrayal? And if you could, if you managed to keep your heart beating beneath the cold steel of your badge, what would you say to the families you destroyed? To the children who grow up fatherless, to the dreams buried in foreign dirt, to the lives erased by your orders? This isn't a game, this isn't politics, this is human suffering, writ large in the shadows of America's promise. The question, in just what ICE has done, it's what you will do when confronted with the truth. Will you look away, will you follow orders blindly, or will you be the one to pull off the mask, shatter the silence, and say enough? Because the choice is yours every single day, and history will remember which side you chose. To wear a badge is to carry a responsibility not just to laws, but to the deeper moral compass that guides all decent human beings, whether grounded in faith, reason, or simple common sense. Ethics aren't optional in this line of work, they're the very foundation of justice. But in the world of ICE, ethics have often been replaced by orders, fear, and blind obedience, where the hard truths of kindness, empathy, and logic get drowned out by bureaucratic coldness. What does it mean to do harm to people who are not your enemies, who are simply seeking safety, stability, or a better life? If you believe in an Almighty, the question is simple: what does your Creator think when you strip a mother from her child, when you deport someone who has lived decades contributing to the very country you serve? If justice is divine, how do you justify cruelty dressed as law? For those who don't lean on religion, ethics and humanity still demand more. Common sense says that treating people like numbers or threats instead of neighbors fractures the social fabric that holds us all together. To ignore the humanity behind every face you detain is not just a failure of empathy, it's a failure of logic. Because kindness is not weakness, it's strength. Compassion is not chaos, it's order. The true measure of any law enforcement and how many they arrest, it's how many they protect without breaking their spirit. And history will judge harshly those who chose masks over morals, fear over fairness, and orders over the voice inside that whispers, "This is wrong." So before you don that uniform, before you raise your voice to enforce a system built on suffering, ask yourself, what will I answer to when the highest court calls me to account?